All right, thank you. So now we're going to have a talk on marketing strategies and executions for games, both 2D and virtual reality games. So if Andreas can come on up.
Yep. Is this on?
Great.
All right, cool. I don't know how I'm going to do this after that joke. Worst entry ever. All right, so we're going to stay in the world of games, which is cool. But now it's all about marketing, and more specifically, marketing for VR games compared to flat screen games. So my name is Andreas Juliusson. I am the PR and marketing manager for Swedish VR games developer Fast Travel Games. A brief background check on myself. I've been in the video games industry in marketing roles for 14 years, 13 of those in flat screen for these companies primarily. And I've been part of launching a couple of high-profile titles over the last few years for EA DICE, Bandai Namco, for example. But the last year, or the last 1.5 years, I've been solely focusing on VR gaming for fast travel games. We released our debut title, Apex Construct, earlier this year for all the high-end platforms. We also had a boxed release this summer, which, me being an old man in the industry felt, I still remember the discs, the time of discs. I'm going to cover 3 key areas in VR marketing and compare that to flat screen gaming marketing. There are more, of course, but from my point of view, these are the 3 biggest ones where we have an uphill struggle as VR marketers. Going into the VR marketing segment, I thought I would simply be able to use my best practices from the flat screen gaming industry. That is not the case, as I'm sure some of you as well have seen. Do we have any marketers in here, by the way? Any specific marketers? Yeah, cool. Awesome. So the first section will cover consumer highlights, consumer insights. Going back to 72, before I was born, we saw what's known to be the first video game commercial. It's Odyssey by Magnavox. It's a really, really fun trailer that was shown on TV in the US. This is also the year where we saw the first arcade game in Pong. Then, 85-86, of course, Nintendo was released. We had the first ad in a gaming magazine in Famitsu in Japan. 92, first-person shooters started to become a thing with Wolfenstein, and they haven't changed much since then. It's still the most popular way of playing games, and of course, for VR, the first-person view is also the most common one. In 2003, Steam was launched for Windows, which meant the world for any marketer where you have a lot of data from consumers now in the digital databases. And 2 years ago, we saw the first consumer headsets brought to market with the Oculus and Vive. Today, it's said that we have around 2 billion gamers around the world who is playing on a device, and a little bit more than 5 million high-end headsets sold in comparisons, the tethered for PC and PlayStation VR. So, to summarize, we have had 46 years of insights gathering for the flat screen gaming industry, but VR has had 3 years, or not even 3 years. So that's a big, big difference when it comes to using data in your marketing, of course. Looking at how EA, in their situation as one of the world's biggest publishers and developers, they have the majority of the world's gamers in their database, which means they can do a lot of stuff that we can't do in VR marketing. They can use the data for their marketing initiatives. They can treat their loyal customers with incentives. They can offer exclusive offers and even drive in-game opportunities. For VR, consumer data is heavily lacking. It's a lot of gut feeling today that you try to ride upon. Super data are providing a lot of insights for us, luckily enough. But it's still a situation where we have a lot of rough target groups. CRM hasn't really kicked off. There is no real retargeting happening for most VR developers. we're very dependent on first party, as I'm sure you're aware. I mean, we are in the hands of PlayStation and Oculus and Vive, etc., HTC. And we also don't know much about consumer expectations and needs. We've seen that, everyone asks the question, what is actually selling in VR? We have seen a couple of games that have sold really well, but the reason behind that is still a bit unclear to us. Also, what the next commercial success will be. And in-game opportunities hasn't kicked off. That was also covered yesterday in the introductional presentation, that we haven't seen any opportunities yet to monetize on existing games in VR. Consumer insights is also important when it comes to value perception. This is a case from 2016, where a well-known developer, Insomniac, released Feral rights for Oculus. For $49.99, and a week after launch, they permanently put the price down to $29.99, admitting that they miscalculated the consumer expectations on price and value. And this is basically unprecedented in flat-screen gaming these days. It happened a long time ago. Now flat-screen gamers or the game companies know almost exactly how to price their games. Looking at Steam prices, in 2017, the average price for a premium VR game doubled from $7 to $14. And looking at the top 100 from this year, the prices of the top 100 best-selling games on Steam go from $3.99 up to $59.99, with an average price of around $19. So it's very hard to try to perceive the value of customers. So how do you determine the price of your VR game? That's a really, really important question, I think, over the next few years, as different consumers head into untethered headsets, for example. How will they perceive the value of your game? There are a couple of things that you can do as a marketer in VR. These are two examples from our own campaign for Apex Construct. Luckily, we have some target opportunities in the market. Most VR studios, such as us, we don't have a big budget for marketing. So we need to find ways to reach our target audiences immediately and directly, and only them. We can't spend money on secondary or tertiary target groups. Yeah. So at Facebook, for example, there are ways to find people with interests in Oculus or Vive, etc., and gaming or PSVR. For very little money, we actually achieved quite a lot of good success with a launch trailer. We only spent $2,500. Same thing goes with, for example, Reddit. There's also a way where you can find specific subreddits for Oculus Rift or Vive or PlayStation VR. Even Windows Mixed Reality has their own subreddits. So these ways are initiatives to work around the fact that you're struggling to find your target groups. And we spent $90 on this campaign, which was half our budget. No. It felt like it. So to round this up, the first session, try and learn. That's the most important thing right now. Optimize first party. This goes without saying, but the more you can work with the headset developers themselves in their platforms, the better your results will be today. Try to determine the value of your game by looking at competitors, looking at past cases, your own performances of your own previous releases, etc., and set the right price point because it is key. And claim your own insights. Even though it's very early, establish your own ecosystem and start your CRM channels so you can utilize them for the long term. Second session is about press and media. The previous panel talked a bit about press, the fact that it's so hard to get traction in the general gaming media for VR these days. These are 3 quotes that I've encountered in 2018 when talking to the bigger gaming media or scanning their communication on social media. VR is a really tough sell for our audience, says GameSpot. Writing about VR is the fastest way to guarantee almost nobody will click on a story you worked on, said Vice Waypoint, and then PSVR content generally tanks traffic-wise. So this is the situation we're in today. We can keep bashing our heads against the wall, but you most likely, as an indie studio or a smaller studio in VR, you won't get traction in the bigger gaming media. getting your game reviewed is also quite tricky if you tend to focus too hard on the traditional gaming media channels. GameStop has, as live to date, 39 VR game reviews in total, and only 8 this year so far. So they actually scaled down a lot. There is no dedicated VR category, but they are, one of the biggest gaming websites in the world. Looking at the VR specialist media instead, of course, they are much smaller when it comes to monthly visits. But they do a lot of VR coverage daily, and they review almost every good game, not the shovelware, but every good game that comes out to market. So what's also interesting to see is that you tend to get a higher review score from the VR media specialist, probably because they understand VR and they play your game and review it in a different way than a general gaming media outlet would do. So this is our average scores for Apex Construct. It's almost 10 scores higher in VR media compared to gaming media. You also get much more in-depth coverage in VR gaming media and if you work successfully with first party. This is a blog post from PlayStation and Upload VR, who came to our office and did an interview with our devs, for example. For our launch of Apex Construct, 50% of the coverage we got in media was from first party and VR media. We also worked heavily with influencers. Now they've been around for flat screen games forever, and they charge loads of money if you want videos in a more pristine influencers or YouTubers. VR is in a different situation. We have Nathy, which I'm sure most of you know of if you work with marketing, because he is the biggest. He's been on Forbes and has close to 500,000 followers, but the rest are up and coming stars who are super passionate and eager to work with studios like us, for example. So what we did, we focused actually almost half our marketing budget on influencers for Apex, and we achieved a hell of a lot more YouTube views in influencer channels than we did for our own launch trailer. And we also gained a lot of long-term connection to these people who helped bring fast travel to the market and make a name for ourselves, which we couldn't do ourselves really in the position we were. So that's something I think marketers should keep their eye on going forward before they start charging money for it as well. That will happen. It has started, actually. So to round this section up, VR media focus can be good. You do get more in-depth coverage, and you do get more passion from these outlets. You can also be selective when it comes to general gaming media. There are a lot of smaller local outlets who are keen on covering your game, keen about writing about the VR industry as well. The influencer segment can help you bring your studio and a game to the market and create a voice for you. And this goes for everyone really in the gaming industry. Engage with gamers. They are super happy whenever a studio pops up at Reddit to run an AMA or are active in a Facebook community. They give you a lot of feedback on your game, for example. They spread the word, and it doesn't cost you money. Last session is about assets. So here's an example of Skyrim and how Skyrim is promoting itself on Steam with screenshots. These are 3 flat screen screenshots. And these are 3 VR screenshots. Now the only difference really is that they have included the first person view of a weapon and they've added VR to the screenshot. That's really what you can do in a traditional screenshot way. Not much different, and it doesn't really sell the full VR experience, of course. You could argue that they are in a situation where Skyrim is so well known that they don't have to start from scratch. I mentioned before about Odyssey by Magnavox, the first video game commercial from '72. These are screen dumps from that video. You see some happy family faces there enjoying soccer or ice hockey or tennis in a very, very, very fun and nice way. A video like this shows you the exact replica of what you will get in your home. Yeah, it's an immediate understanding of what you will get. There's no discrepancy between you and the experience you see on the screen. Another example is 360 videos, who has been used a lot by VR companies as well. Now, according to Business Insider, 360 and VR advertising matters more for non-VR companies because they are trying to sell concepts that actually using the fantasy of VR, while as a VR company, it doesn't really convey the experience of the game that you have made in VR. Live action videos, another asset that was used again by Skyrim when they put Skyrim VR to market, for example. It can look cool, but live action has been done for many, many years, also from flat screen gamers, and it's more about selling a fantasy of being someone else rather than the actual gameplay experience. So again, you have a couple of traditional assets from flat screen gaming that you can use for VR gaming advertising, but it's such a distance between the experience that you have created in your game and what you're trying to convey. We saw great success with the more emotional assets like these, where YouTubers actually show a reaction to something in combination with your game. So that can be a suggestion as well, to look into more emotion. It can still be a flat screen, but it's it sells a fantasy of being part of an action scene or so, and it also shows the VR equipment. So it's an immediate understanding that it's a VR game and they're having fun. This is all something that I encounter a lot when I talk to other marketers as well, like, how it's so tricky to sell VR. You have to put a headset on someone for them to understand how cool VR is, and that's true. But this girl in this example here, she plays VR. These guys, let's say they never tried VR before. These guys in the couch are super important for the headset developers because they are the ones they need to convince to get the headset at some point. And they try heavily to do that by going to events, running arcades, etc. But we as games developer, we are in a situation where there is an install base. It will soon hopefully be 10 million headsets out there in the market. And the active players of VR, they know about VR. They've tried VR and they're sold about the concept. So it's not always the case where you have to sell the full experience, but rather convince an active audience that your game is a must-have for VR because X, Y, Z. So who do you need to convince? That's a really good question. You might not have to convince the people who have never tried VR before, but rather focus on the increasing install base. So suggestion, again, know your audience. You might not have to sell the full experience. Press on key VR features. That is key and something we actually missed on doing for Apex Construct. If you can tell the active VR audience exactly why your game is the best on the market, you will be in a good position. You can also play with assets. The 360 asset or the live video action, for example, can be great assets to create a sense of buzz and coolness around your game. It won't sell the full VR experience, but it might help you get awareness or engagement. And try to create emotions with what you do, because VR is a lot about emotions. So if there are ways to use your assets to create emotions, try to do that in any way possible. All right, this is a summary of what I just went through. 15 minutes, it's a massive topic that can stand here for hours to talk about, but if there is something you should take away from this presentation here today, some suggestions, it's this basically. I also want to leave a few minutes for questions. If you want to get in touch with me, this is my email, this is my and our company's Twitter accounts and our website. So thanks for that, 15 minutes.
We have time for one question. Any questions?
Where did you find that collection of VR influencers? Because I'm working on an influencer campaign, and they're so spread out, and everyone has separate, and then some of them you think are going to cover you editorially, and then some of them are like, oh, but I want you to, and you have to approach them at different times. I would just love to hear about your influencer
We flew
experience.
10 of them to Stockholm, actually. We had a local event for influencers in Stockholm. We flew 10 of them in. We didn't pay them anything except for the trip. But I manually scanned YouTube for them, like good old days, scanning of YouTube. So it worked. For us, it worked really good. I know there are tools, like we have a tool called Meltwater for press that can also find influencers, but it's trickier actually than going to YouTube directly and research them. And ask them who they would like to, invite, who we should talk to, because they're all part of a big network now. It's growing. So
Excellent. Thank you very much.
cool, thanks.
All right.